Hey everyone, it's Time Spiraled. I'm finally back from my Europe trip, which means it's time to get back to these set reviews. So, fair warning, we already know which sets made it into the format, so they've already been announced. It's going to be End of Wolensea and Toll Midnight, but I did promise that I would do all the set reviews because even though these sets didn't get in, it's cool to go over them. And I have time, and the weather is a lot, nicer than it used to be, so I shouldn't have to run the AC, which means I should be able to do the remaining sets today. I will note, I do not think we will get to Innistrad in Memoriam. As far as I know, the image gallery for that has been temporarily taken down as its designer is reworking some of the cards. If ever I get the chance to do it, I definitely will in the future. But for now, we're going to be going through the remaining sets that I haven't tackled. So we are starting with Undaum, today by Popcornia. So, fair warning, again, I've already gone through all the sets because I had to vote on them. So, the sets that I didn't get to do as a video, I sent their designers a sort of a watch list of things that I noted. So, I might move through here a little faster than before, which might be great if we can get some of these in under an hour. So, I already have a small list of the cards I should stop at, and maybe I don't stop at them this time. Maybe it means I've, warmed up to them. So, Undaum's a pretty cool set. Real quick, I'm just going to stop by the set details. We've got a battle cruiser magic set focusing on large spells. It features mechanics which cares about large quantities of mana and encourages other ways to spend reserves through activated abilities and high mana values. It's got a big story. I can't stop to read it all. I highly recommend you go check out the set. A 24 card story spotlight is pretty fantastic. So, and we'll get through the mechanics that you can see here as we hit them. Alright, so I'm not going to stop at every common. Most of them are totally fine. I flagged just a few, I believe, so it shouldn't be too bad. So we're going to go through pretty quickly. First of all, I like the art a lot in this set. A lot of pieces are from some of my favorite Magic artists, and they kind of mesh well in the sort of high-quality fantasy art. So I think all in all, things look pretty good. So cards like Argent Magus, totally fine. I think the cost is fine even if it's repeatable at common. It just means if you get up to 6 mana, it becomes kind of exciting to just log down some of your opponent's things. Argent Unmaking is a totally fine removal. Auric Stratagem, if you're able to get huge quantities of white, can be a pretty cool combat trick, being able to split up counters and first strike. And it's our first instance of Formulate, where when you cast a spell, you get the first mode for free, so giving something first strike, and then you have to start paying for additional modes, and you can always repeat the same mode. So this could be a whole field of first strikes, or it could be counters and first strikes, however you want. So I like Formulate. I like just this little one colored bar. I think it makes the cards look actually pretty good. We have our first Invoker here. Plus Flying Vigilance is totally fine. Awakened Initiate is totally cool. Pardon me. Balm Runner, lifelink, and then gets slightly bigger with Magecraft, so you're going to see Magecraft returning here from Strixhaven. Chapel Persecutor, similar, gets +1. This one is only on itself, while Balm Runner can kind of pass the +1/+0 around. It does mean that some of these are onboard tricks, but, usually something that you try to avoid in Limited is that each of these can do a lot. This is this is a bit less of a problem because it's only by itself, but Chaplain of Resolve, this is totally fine. Detain is an interesting card where white's returning a tap creature, but white can always remove tap creatures, so this is probably fine. It was not a problem for me. Garden Hound is cute. Hinterland Courser is totally fine. No issues here. Holding Spell is totally fine removal, and I actually like the Exile if you attack with 3. It's nice. Story Spotlight 11 out of 24, so definitely a lot to go find here. Idealist Mantra is a fine big removal that can actually make a pretty decent body here in Limited. March into History is fine, as is Plaza Enforcer, which is a solid blade that dies into a 1/1. I believe Reflected Resolve was my first flag, so here we go. Breakthrough is, at the beginning of the next end step, in this case, if you spent 7 or more mana this turn, you create 2 4/4 white human angel creature tokens with flying, and the base case is a 2 mana +2/+2 indestructible. I do not think you can put this kind of effect on a common. You will eventually get an Invoker or something at 7 mana, and paying 2 to get 2 4/4 white human angel with flying, that's absolutely cracked. So this was the first card I think that went onto my watch list, and I definitely think this bottom text is way too good. Rock of the Valley is fine. Secure the Perimeter is also fine. These are just nice and cheap. Templar's Finale Very simple removal here, so shouldn't be any issues there. I believe there's not going to be much here in blue at common that was a worry, so Aqueous Shaper, it's fine, it slowly grows. Arcane Consultation is a nice little draw. So see, this one is at the beginning of the next end step, you spend 7 or more, you get 2/2/2 blue reflections. That's still pretty good, but, you know, it's a lot safer than Reflected Resolve, so something to keep in mind here. Cerebral Stimulus is a neat little formulate. It's, you know, not great just for blue, but if you can start digging deep or adding on to the draw 2, it's pretty fun to combine. Coastal Lurker is fine. It just slowly grows and can't be blocked, which is probably a good way to end the games in this limited, since it's Battle Cruiser. Unblockable can kind of chip in some pretty big damage here. Eager Disciple, totally fine. Little scry here. Repeatable Surveil is fine, though, at 3. Should be okay here at common. Focus Study is neat. You draw 3, and then if there were 2 or fewer instants already in your graveyard, so kind of like a Magecraft thing, you have to discard a card. Iridescent Drake, very neat. 4 Power Flyer at common is always really good, and the fact that it dies into a reflection is pretty good. Mage's Warding, Mentalist Chant, and Mortal Conjurant are all fine. They're good little fillers here. I like that we're seeing a lot of this 2/2 blue reflection creature token. We'll have to check the tokens at the end to see if they were in the file. I don't remember. Invoker here, just pretty simple one that draws 2 cards. Reconsider is a reprint from MSEM, so it's nice to see it here. Reconstitute brings back a creature you control to your hand, and you get a 2/2, which is kind of neat. Rune Condor is fine. Space Between is fine. As a can't block, draw 3. This is like a big 7. So this is how you get those breakthrough triggers, right? And of course, if you need to pitch it early, you can always use it as a cheaper evasion. Thaumaturge's Gambit, totally fine as well. I actually quite like that if you control token, you can draw a card, which makes this a really good removal. Visionary Research, I believe this one digs for big stuff. Yeah, instant sorceries, cards with mana value 5 or greater, and the rest into the graveyard, but 3 for sorcery, totally fine. Winged Aegis is a funky little turtle. It just, whenever you cast or copy, you untap it and it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is really good, especially on a 2/4 flying for 4 body. Like, this is really thick. It's going to block a lot of things, and being able to suddenly become a 3/5 and untap is really good. Arrogant Magistocrat was one of the cards I watched list just because it's a very cheap. Each opponent loses a life on a 1-drop 1/1, so you don't need too many of those down before every instant or sorcery just progressively kills your opponent flat. So I had just marked that as a maybe keep an eye on that. I think the rest of black is pretty safe, though it's funny that the demon token is there because I believe the reflection token wasn't, so that might just be flagged incorrectly. Canal Smuggler, totally fine. It's a good activated ability for you to eventually get to 7 mana, and the fact that it's even, you know, you're not going to exactly get there, you'll have to do something else. Cast Off Wretch is neat. Cloister Keepers is neat. I do think this is maybe one of the few arts that I was like, maybe clashes a little bit with the aesthetic, because it looks a little goofy compared to the more serious cards I'm seeing. Discorporate is fine, but it is a name of a card already in MSEM, so I already let Popcornia know that. Duskwold Warden, Surveils and stuff, totally fine. Same for everything here on this line. So I think the rest of black actually was pretty fine. I had no issues with cards like Evocator's Dirge, Hazardous Research. The formulate's pretty well costed, even though, you know, discard, 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 but at that point you're paying 6 mana, so, like, you know, they kind of deserved it, I guess. Into the Abyss is fine. It's super expensive removal for limited, but it's one of those cards that's like, hey, the reason it costs 6 is that we need a big instant and sorcery that does a little bit of something and probably gets you up to your breakthrough cost. So, Political Maneuver is fine. Ruthless Disciple is a real, is you know, honestly, looking at this, Ruthless Disciple seems so much better than Into the Abyss, especially with the flash, actually, now that I'm coming to think about it. Maybe you want to check these 2 slots, see if maybe Into the Abyss could be a little better. Soulforge Rager is fine. It becomes a pretty big trampler. Doesn't have flying, though, so ignore the whatever's on its back. They're probably not wings anyway. Spellbond Familiar, totally fine. It just becomes a big attacker. Tools of the Trade is neat. Unbrokered Assailant is also fine. Vile Renewal is pretty good. You bring back a creature with mana value 3 or less, and one with 4 or greater. So pretty good flexible recursion here. Vis Manipulator is fine, Vis Rend is fine, as is Vorgin Invoker. So this one's probably really good, because if you're able to just keep killing their best thing, that probably makes a big difference. at least for limited wise. Going into red, I flagged Bolt of Inspiration, I think primarily just for the limited, because 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker at 3 is fine, but if you spent 7 or more mana, you bring it back from your graveyard to your hand. So if you can ever have 2 of these and or 1 and a way to pay the remaining 7, getting back removal constantly seems like pretty miserable and limited. I don't think I would like to play against this card much. Cards like Bring Down, Charge Runner, Conflagration Ritualist, these are all fine. See, this doesn't affect the board, it just deals damage to each opponent. Sam Canios here does a lot of cool art. I'm a big fan of this artist, and they do a lot of art that's very much like Magic centric. It's got this kind of like, I would say like a plasticky feel to it sometimes, but the cards tend to look pretty good. So Dune Stinger is like, costs 1 more than the black one, but it is a 1/3, but you know, having 2 of them in the deck definitely is a little scary. Rebuttal was fine, Catalyst, Momentum, these cards are all pretty balanced and fine. I don't believe I had any issues with any of these. I think my next one is Rev Up, which is down here. Mage Blade Recruit is fine, Lava Cat is cool. I like the kind of stuff that gets double strike, and because it loots, you'll eventually get there. This Invoker is totally fine. Obviate is definitely fine, as is Renegade Technician. I kind of like it a lot because when you attack with 3 or more, it gets big. So maybe in a dedicated deck, this could be a pretty scary creature, because if you can go, you know, turn 1 and then obviously the God Hand of having 2 others. But then you need, you know, another, because it's 3 or more. So you really have to... Oh, no, it counts itself. Never mind. So yeah, if you can get 3 down, you know, you can swing like crazy. So yeah, maybe this should have been on my watch list. We'll see. So Rev Up was on my watch list, just as a really cheap... Yes, you have to pay 1 on a red or discard a card, but +3/+1, trample, and draw a card for red at instant was a little concerning. It's too often going to be, I felt, a sort of like Bolt, and there's a lot of flexibility in how you pay, and if there's a Madness deck, I don't know. It just felt that there's a lot of here that could be potentially concerning, so I watch list. And a reminder, watch list doesn't mean absolutely has to change, it just means I might have some small concerns, and it's the kind of card that I might bring up in council chat, and my goodness, in council chat, should the set ever get in. Everything else here, I believe, was fine. Ritualist, Scorching Ray, Seismic Stroke are totally fine, as is Stream of Consciousness and Toilfield Stoker. And yes, I know I'm moving through some of these comments faster than I used to. I encourage you either to pause or to check most of these by yourself. It's just going to make my life so much easier if I don't read the 100 comments, and we can just skip right to the good stuff, as they say. I think everything in green was fine. I don't believe I have any issues here. So Grappler, Chronicler, Circle of Strife, Disarming Mist, all really cool. Pronghorn, Warden, I had no issues, I believe, with Explosive Sowing. I like the breakthroughs doing big stuff. I just, you know, it's important that they don't do too big, because you land a few of them, or you cast, I mean, you know, the sorcery is not too bad here, but little things to keep in mind. Ferrum Invoker is fine. This is just one of the ones that grows. Plea is fine, little flexible pump spell there that can also make your lands a little bigger. We've got some more regular creatures here. I definitely have to stop and read the flavor text, because as we get to like these weird funky beasts and dinosaurs, I want to see like where they're coming from. Because, you know, it seems relatively generic fantasy, and then we get to these and I'm like, dang, like there's some pretty cool stuff on this plane. Nature's Resurgence is fine, Cataloger is fine, Preserve Hound is totally fine, though, you know, 4/3 trample base is fine, and then when you get to 7, it starts, you know, absolutely killing you. So when you get it, this format's saying, hey, you get to 7 mana, you're going to start killing your opponent, and if that's how it is, that's like, you know, totally fine. Promising Growth is a fine Formulate card, Regenerating Sinew is fine, as is the remaining 3s here. Vital Keeper, Test of Nature, and Sylvan Rebuttal. I actually quite like Vital Keeper. Just art, flavor text, and the ability all together are quite nice. I believe all the artifacts were pretty safe. Arcane Cartography is fine. Channeler's Glove is quite neat, actually, and for a 1/1 equipment, it's quite cheap, so this could be something to keep an eye on, but requiring lots of instants and sorceries is probably safe. Chromatic Strix is fine, as is Riveted Sentinel. Just this is, you know, the kind of thing that's like, hey, I get to 7 mana, I'm going to play this huge thing, and I will trigger Breakthrough. Thalmic Saber is pretty neat, and Radiant Fountain is a nice little reprint. So that's the commons here in Undaum. I'm just going to check. Okay, the tokens are not there. I wonder if I can... Yeah, okay. We don't have the tokens, unfortunately. Let's move on to Uncommon. Checking my notes here, we've got a few that I'm going to bring up, I think, down here in the S's, but we'll see as we get there. So, Abstraction of Glory, very fine. You can, double copy it if you pay the extra 1 and a white. Angelify is really neat. +3/+3 flying at instant speed. Flash for 4 is not bad, and then, of course, it starts killing you, but that's a limited problem, less than a constructed one. Let's see, I'm just going to put a little mark so I know where I am. Ascendant Path is neat. You get a reflection or you get an angel, so that's a lot of flexibility to grow your board. Autarch's Guard, very cool. I like these kind of 2/1s. Some more Sam cameos here coming in. So, and I think some of these arts are just, Julie and stuff. They give me a lot of like vibes to back to the kind of stuff I was working on like years and years ago. These are the artists that I was using for like cubes and stuff, which is really cool. Chaplain is cool to see with all the creature tokens that we've been seeing in white-blue. Dawn's Pride is also very cool, and it's, +1 until end of turn, not a counter, so a little safer. Defiant Hexblade is pretty good. Hexproof from instance, and then when it attacks, it gains indestructible, so it's pretty hard to kill. We come to our first of our MDFCs. The ratio at Undaum was pretty high, so I believe I had not flagged them necessarily for power concerns, but for quantity. I put in 5 MDFCs, my gosh, I wonder if I pronounced that right, until midnight, and even I was like, are we ready to have that be a part of the format? Like, we didn't have them for forever. Like, this is it's not technically the first. We technically have one MDFC, I believe, in grade. Let me bring up grade just so we can see it. So it's this legendary that we have, and the backside is Rusted Grove. But, enters tapped. It's a tri-pain land, but then you can bring it back. So that's really the only MDFC I believe that we had. But we would be adding quite a few. I think there's about 3 to 4 at uncommon, and I think there's some more at rare, so we'll have to check. At least these enter tapped, and let me say, like, they're really pretty to look at. It's really nice. So, yeah, anyway, a lot of talk about the MDFCs. Unless I call them out specifically, I think most are fine. It was just a quantity thing more so than a power thing. Inner Magnificence is fine. I actually quite like this card. It's kind of scary if you can cast a big 7-drop and then suddenly your board gets +2/+2 and Vigilance, so it's quite good. Light Warden is pretty scary here in limited. 6/6 Vigilance that dies and you distribute 6 counters, so, pretty hard to beat. This is the kind of stuff you'd imagine would normally be rare, so, but again, it's less so that I care, not that I don't care about the limited, but I usually vote more so based on the constructed, because if we fix the constructed, usually we'll fix the limited, so that's not too concerning. This is a really good Magecraft, creating a lot of 1/1, so the uncommon level, limited-wise, is already like a step above. Regal Sentinel, I remember being pretty good. It just grows into 3/4 flyer for 5, but, it's already pretty much safer, I think, than the other stuff. I believe Sigiled Riposte was one of the first MDFCs that I called out specifically because +2/+6 and untap for 2 is a little scary. Like, there's some crazy stuff you can do, like tower defense-wise for anything that, like, uses its toughness. That can be, +6 damage. And then the fact that it's also an MDFC, so something just to keep in mind. Same thing for Story Justice being a actually decent 3 damage attacking or blocking and then flips, but again, this one's pretty safe. So I think I had just brought it up as a, hey, this is actually like pretty playable removal, and it's also got the lands. Because I know in Zendikar Rising, a lot of the MDFCs usually cost, like, it's the +1 mana thing. And again, not that I necessarily did that until midnight, but at uncommon, it's just something I wanted to check with for the limited. Sunlit Strength as well, a counter on each creature, sorcery for 2 is the base cost of that with Basri's something? My gosh. Basri's Solidarity, and now this one also has MDFC land stable to it. And this was already like 2 mana cheaper than, like, 1 or 2 mana cheaper than previous cards that had that similar effect, so something to keep in mind. What do we have here? Abstraction of Reason was fine, just the draw that you could double. These are all, again, kind of nice for getting to breakthrough. Aerodynamics was neat. Anatoko Sentinel, again, on the MDFC thing. It's a 5/5 flyer for 6, which is huge, but also has got the land, so pretty good in multiples. Arcanoform Conduit is really cool. It's a 2/3 flying that gives creature tokens flying. Like, this is the kind of card I would like to play with. Arcfrost Grappler was totally fine. Brackish Retort, I think at 3 is about where the Cannon one is about, so I think this is very similar to the one we saw in MH3. I believe I had mentioned Capture Wave as being the same issue as the red removal, where it returns a non-land permanent, but if you've breakthrough, you get it back. So just constantly keeping your opponent's thing off the board is probably pretty miserable. Decipher was cool. Glacial Barrier was fine. Mentalist, Murkminder. I think the rest of these cards here in blue are pretty fine. I like how this just becomes a permanent 7/7 flying when you get to 7, which is kind of great. So something to keep in mind here. Like, again, more of a limited thing, just something to keep in mind. Rhineland Suppression is fine. Abjurant seemed pretty fine as well. Just slowly grows as a flyer, so that's really cool. Thalmic is big, 6 mana removal, kind of with the stuff you want for to get rid of your opponent's stuff and get up to that breakthrough cost. I really like Weaver of Forms. Just a flash 3/3 that makes a 2/2. Like, that's really good. Apologies if you can hear all those cars racing around my street. It's kind of nuts in my area. We have a lot of, we have a big street, and you got cars, policemen, you got fire. It's the whole thing at any time of the day. Abstraction of Pride as a double removal is pretty good for limited here. Corpator Ritual, I think, was pretty fine. Cutout was fine. Double removal again, but, you lose 3 life on the front half, so it kind of balances itself out. Scavenger, 5/4 haste for 5 is not, nothing, and it's one of those bigs where if you have multiples, you can just land them until you get up to this one. Feign, Finality, I believe, was fine. Hulking Spellfist, Malignant End, 5 mana. This is where we're like, okay, this is a cost, right? Massive Cast-Off, Parlor Guard, Revenant Agent were all fine. Sleuth's Cunning I had no issue with. Same thing with Violet Persuader. A lot of these cards are just nice and clean, which is nice. Vis Dregs, the kind of card that you just need to keep an eye on because, for each instant and sorcery, sometimes you can get like a lot, and this thing is just absolutely huge, but I think it's kind of fine. What else we got here? We've got Weight of Expectations. I think that one was fine. Same for Will to Power. Yeah, it can be a lot of like double removal, like +2, -2 twice, or so very flexible, but I think it was within range of what you'd expect. Abstraction of Desire was fine. I remember just keeping an eye on big score. You never know when that card's going to do stuff. It's just a nice little card. Manticore was fine. Catalytic Gorger was fine. This one has a 7 mana activate, so this will trigger your breakthrough every turn, so something to keep in mind. Chemister was fine, because it's the one that discards. Yeah, and then Fault Line Testing was 1 damage to each. This was fine, at 3 mana. I didn't have a big issue with it. I believe Force Feedback I had no issue with, neither did I have with Identity Crisis. Ignite Possibility I think was one of the first ones that I flagged, because deal damage to each opponent equal to the number of instant and or sorcery cards. And you're going to draw 2, discard 2 on the front half. So let's say you get to 5 mana and you have like 5 spells, that's 5 damage. If you get to 7 mana, and then it deals it again. So I felt like that bottom text was maybe a little worrisome in multiples. Lava Mongrel, Orders Received was totally fine. Procula Sabotage was one that I was just keeping an eye on because, 5 damage target player for 5 is like Lava Axe, and it comes with the land, which is pretty big upside to have on that kind of card. Rust Bucket Brawler seems like it's fine. Yeah, this is the one with other creatures that share a name. I thought it was pretty cool. And it creates copies of itself. It's pretty good. It's just, I think it's a great design. Thunder Zoo is neat. It gets pretty big, pretty fast. I'd be really worried about leaving this on the board out on turn 5, because who knows how much damage this can chip in. Total Field Expedition was fine, though, again, this is usually about where that effect costs, and, you're also throwing in the backside, so very flexible. Did I miss one? No, looks like it. Did I reckless? Must be later. Abstraction of Self was fine. It goes to your hand, not the battlefield, by the way, if you're wondering like why I'm saying something like that. Resurgence was fine. Agent was cool. Center Reality, Colossal Majesty is a reprint, I believe. So these are all fine. Deadwood Awakener, very neat. Medium of Might, Memoir Collector, these were all fine. This, removal on these breakthroughs means if you line up perfectly, you can just absolutely sweep your opponent's board, which is always interesting. I actually quite like Medium of Might. What else we got here? Pine Watch Guardian was neat. Rosewind Boon felt pretty safe. Same thing here. Thorncrest Mauler slowly grows. Tangled Harbinger was cool. Inheritance, Thrash, these are all fine. Same with Wandering Locust. So I think it's down here that, yeah, okay. So it's down in the gold uncommons that I had, I think, a few things of note. Basilica Archivist was pretty cool. This is a really wild text to have on an uncommon, right? Cast an instant sorcery in your graveyard without paying, and the fact that you're discarding, you can slowly filter in. But yeah, you do have to pay a 5. But, you know, reanimating any of your instants and sorceries, there's some pretty gross ones in the format. Cast Off Sentinel is really cool. Big fan of it. Also, big fan of the art. So, Dmitry Burmak, shout out. Awesome. Duskgold Persecutor, I believe, was pretty safe. Empyrean Strategist can probably get pretty obnoxious and limited. Just whenever your board dies, it just, you know, keeps bringing back reflection creatures unless you get rid of it first. Life Wreath Renegade is cool. I quite like that. Not just because I have mana value 5 or greater in my sets, but, you know, just kind of a cool effect. Mage Blade Striker, another each opponent loses 1 life. So, you know, you get the black one, you get the red one, and then you get this one. And then whenever you cast something, your opponent just dies. Natural Guardian was fine. I think that's an artist signature or something here. If ever you care, Pop, you can clip that out. I believe I had flagged Reckless Enthusiasm because just the base case of always drawing, you know, exiling the top card, you can play it this turn, is not horrible. Play means you can also get your lands. And then Breakthrough, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. So that's kind of scary on a 3-mana uncommon. So something that I wanted to keep in mind. Shadow Patron, I believe, was totally fine. Same thing with Toilfield Channeler. I kind of like it. Some more Sam Canios art. You can usually tell that artist. Arcane Encyclopedia is a cool reprint. Warplow is totally fine. Same thing with Boomrod and Stinger Simulacra. I do think, though, that 3-tap, make a 1/1, 3-tap, make a 1 flyer, this can get really annoying to deal with in Limited. It's just going to always stop like their best thing, and it's probably not going to be too hard to get 3, and that seems to be like a good setup for like Breakthrough as well. So I think I remember this card just being more of a concern in Limited rather than Constructed. And Arcane Nexus is totally fine. Enters tap and it fixes your instants and sorceries. So moving on to rares, things are pretty cool. We get cards like Angelic Responder, a flash flyer that gets temporarily indestructible is like pretty good. Ego Vault is really nice as well. Exiles, and then, you know, they can pay 2 to recast it. Envisioned Ascension, I believe, was one of the ones I had flagged. As we get to the rares, I'm going to flag quite a few more things, but that's just normal with how power levels of stuff works. +2/+2 for each attacking creature you control. So at a base, if it attacks, +2/+2, another 1/4. You stick this on a 1/1 flyer, and suddenly things go completely out of control. So I had marked that one. Yeah, you get 2 for 1, but like if you don't, they die, right? Helis' Theorem was totally fine. I had no issue, I believe, with Liberi either. Yeah, she gets a lot of big stuff, but you do need 3 or more creatures. Luminous Sovereign, again, I'm like that these are tapped, so there's no issues there. And it's a Flying Vigilance for 6, so seems a little more fair. What do we have here? This is Rapid Deployment, I believe, was on my list. Yes, it was. You know, if I read it out, you'll see why. It's a 5-mana instant that creates 5 1/1s, and then if you've spent 7 or more mana, so if you got the 7 and you cast this and you had a 2-mana sink, you get another 5 1/1 soldiers. So it's a lot of soldiers, and it's instant speed. So, you know, something to keep in mind. Yeah. Moving down, we've got Steelfist Renegade. Did I have you on my list? No, I think that was fine. It's a 2/2 for 2. When you cast or copy, you get a counter, and when it dies, you distribute its counters. So it grows fast, and it shares it a lot, but it's the kind of card that I think was fine. We have exile removal in the format, so I think this is probably safe. Under Their Wings, I believe, had flagged. It's an ETB enchantment that creates a 4/4, and then when you tap 3 untapped creatures, you exile a creature, and you can just keep doing this forever, even if it's only at sorcery. It seems kind of nuts to me. Virtued Lancer is fine. Attacks other creatures, get +X/+0, where X was its power, so we've seen other cards like this. I think this was fine at the cost that it was in. What else we got here? Witness of Ideals was fine, in my opinion. You remove all damage and counters. Yeah, I can keep some stuff like permanently alive, but it says another, so you can't ever really save it unless you get a second copy of itself. And then, you know, things are a little... You're doing a lot to keep it alive. Borrowed Epiphany was fine. It, you know, has a chance of missing. So, Detlab Arcanamedician. Oh boy, Arcanamedician. That's a cool word. 2/2 for 3, can't be blocked as long as he has power 5 or greater. And when you cast spells with mana value 5 or greater, you draw a card and put a counter on him. So pretty good. I had flagged Emergent Behavior. It's a 3 mana, get a token of a creature you control. And then Breakthrough, create 3 tokens. That's, to me, that seemed just a little absurd. So definitely something to keep in mind. I had flagged Glimmering Potential, 4 mana sorcery, and you reveal until you reveal an instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less, and you can cast it without paying its mana cost. The fact that this costs 4 means you could kind of build one of those like Cascade type decks where the only possible target is an instant or sorcery with mana value 3 or less. So, and it's stapled to a land. So I remember just being a little worried about that one. Memory Bearer is pretty cool. When it dies, you get an instant or sorcery with mana value 2 or less. You exile it, and you can cast it, but you have to pay an additional 2. I thought that card is really cool. I quite like it. Would love to actually see it in the format. Maybe as the wild card. Who knows? Bonus sheet. I had flagged Modernity. These kind of cards, when there's no like caps, they can just do a lot of stuff, because whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it had 1 or more targets, you get to pick an additional one. Kind of great. And then whenever you cast a blue spell, you then get to return a non-land permanent you control to your hand. Which does less, but, there's a lot you can do. It's just the first one that was a little more concerning. I believe Murai's Theorem was fine. I had no issues with it. It copies counters, but, blue on the baseline. And you don't, counter is not the first. So it's not a better counter spell. It's more of like a copy effect. Revelation Seer. Casting spells as though it had flash is quite cool. And then draw 2. I had flagged that this probably should be, 2 TWO, so that's a little typo here, but easy to make. Roiling Nimbus, pretty big flyer, 6/6 flying for 6, and then it just taps things. Sorry, it doesn't tap things. My goodness, I'm just reading through here way too fast. It gives 2 other things flying, so quite neat. And again, it's the kind of like AA sync that you probably want. Sage of Dismissal seems annoying. Just the fact that it's whenever you cast it returns a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, so good luck landing anything on the board against this guy. Usurp Ego is fine. Yeah, okay. The next one I had flagged is down to Hexkeeper. So it's a 6, you control it, and the thing is a 7/7. It felt a little out of blue, but I know blue has done stuff like this before. It just feels kind of weird that I get to 6, I seal your thing, and then it's absolutely huge in mono blue, but maybe it's fine. Aberrant Existence is a board wipe with this, but, they choose a creature they control, then sack the rest, so could be safe. Spell Cutter, 3/3 Menace deals combat damage to a player. You exile into a sorcery from a graveyard, and as long as it remains exiled, you can cast it and spend mana or mana of any color to cast it. So it does not free cast, so much safer. Evocator's Rights, it's, 2 and 2, sack, draw cards equal to its power, but you lose that much life. I'm sure someone can figure out something more comborific than I can, but, doesn't feel like it's the worst. Final Flickering is fine. It's a 5 mana destroy, and then you bring back something from your graveyard to the battlefield, but you need the opponent to have something, so probably balances itself out. Flight of Torments is fine. It does the Torment thing that we've seen in the format. I like how that's clearly become what Torment means in all of Magic. Howkin is pretty neat. 4/4 Menace for 5, and when you cast a copy and instant sorcery spell, just opponent sacks. So again, one of those, hey, I land this and I have some instants and sorceries. You're just not keeping your board. I had flagged Hexkeeper. It's a 2/1 lifelink for 2, and when you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, any creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. I felt that could be like pretty gross, especially because the lifelink on it. So I remember flagging this little one. Everything else I believe in black here was fine. I had no issues, I believe, with illicit outsourcing, neither with Odysseus Theorem. What else did I have? Slayer of Wretches was the one that grows. Yep, and then when it dies, you can destroy a creature with power less than or equal to. That was fine. It's also adds to sorcery, which makes a big difference. Stygian Edict. So I remember seeing there's a lot of removal in this stuff. It was starting to feel like a lot. And like this is return and removal. And then I believe this is destroy and return. So there's a lot of like overlap here. And it's a little more obvious on a reread than I'm doing here. So something that I just want to call out is it feels some of the stuff are doing a little bit similar area. Completely gruesome art, by the way. This thing's just plowing out of this guy's mouth. Assault Worm is really good, but, it doesn't have haste. It's a 7 mana, 6/6 flyer. When it attacks, deals damage equal to twice the number of attacking creatures you control. Declare Hostilities is a good sweep. Either fights or sweeps, so, pretty good. Eagling, I believe, was fine. I didn't have any issues with Eagling, Energetic Blockbuster. It's a 5 mana 4/4 when it attacks. It goes to an 8/4. Yeah, it's good. Doesn't have evasion, but it is stapled. So again, my whole MDFC comment. Innes' Theorem, which I believe is the cover image I'll have for this video, so you'll see that there. Cool card. Esther, Mageblade Lieutenant, can become huge, but 4 mana. It's cool. It's a nice little package. I think it's safe at 4 mana. Futurist Partisan, 3/2 for 3, but no haste, but it does create 3/3 elementals with trample and haste when you cast, and you have to do it before combat to get the attack in, so they don't enter tapped and attacking. So yeah, pretty good. Every lightning bolt you throw gets another elemental haste, so who knows? This could be interesting. Manic Renewal seemed fine. I believe this is 5. Discard your hand, draw 3 cards, and then if you break through, you get to cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. This gets you most of the way to that, so something to keep in mind. Refiner's Expertise I had flagged. It's a 4 mana. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you can exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. If you choose not to, it just gives you red-red. So it's 3 and a red, just get red-red every turn, which is kind of weird. But if you do exile instants and sorceries, during each of your turns, you can cast cards exiled with Refiner's Expertise. If you do, that goes on the bottom. So it just felt like the whole package was just a little too good. Smoldering Hopes was fine, in my opinion. The pitch to get a 3/3 red with Trample Haste is kind of neat because, getting to 7 is tough. And I kind of like these big 7 ones that you can pitch because, they trigger breakthrough. And there's a little more flexibility there. Thaumtech Runner was pretty cool. Whenever it attacks, you get a treasure, and then 3 or more you can sack it to draw a card. So pretty flexible. Might just be worth considering this whole rag effect sort of thing. Ezani was fine. I believe it's the combat damage. Give me a second. I just have to check this real quick. Yep, it untaps, and then obviously you pay 7 and everything gets big. Collective Self is still in pie. I had to actually check because I wasn't sure. But yep, draw a card for each creature, gain a life. So a lot of stuff going on here. Deadwood Titan is a 9/5 trample haste indestructible is kind of nuts. But a lot of things at 7 mana are nuts. I'd flag Greater Potential because of the tutor, right? You search for a card with mana value 5 or greater and it can get anything, which is like really good in green. So you can even get instants and sorceries. And then Breakthrough, well, if you spend 7 or more mana, you get to slap a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. I felt that 3 mana was doing just a little too much. What do we got next? Insurgent Duelist, I believe I had no issues with. Yeah, things grow, things fight. Car Swarm is also fine. It just grows really big, and then you draw cards when your things become the target of things. So it's nice and big. Again, no trample or evasion, so that makes a big difference here. Nexus Tender adds mana, and then when you cast big stuff, it untaps. But unless you're chaining it a lot, it's probably balanced. Seer of Allegiances was fine. I like the creatures enter. If it wasn't cast from hand, they get a little bigger. 4/4 for 5, so it's kind of fine where it is. I had flagged Selective Nostalgia. This is just restock, but you also have an MDFC land tag to it, so it brings back any 2 cards, which probably is still not constructed playable. I don't know. I think that's a lot of mana to do that, but the fact that it has an MDFC land obviously makes it so, like, worst case, you just play the land. What else we got next? We have Veiled Intercessor, I believe was fine. It's the flash that gives Hexproof Indestructible. Yeah, so, there's a lot, this one's indestructible. Sometimes there's a few things there, Wormwood's Theorem was fine. This is the growth. Yep, and then we get to the golds, and I think I had flagged a few more of here. Let me just let my friend know. Little plans this morning, so. Augmented Clarity. Yeah, search for a green or blue creature card revealed, put into your hand at instant speed for 4. Just felt like kind of nuts to staple to a tapped duel. So these are all tapped duels. I remember just flagging them generally like, hey, this is kind of just, concerning. But I don't know how many of them I had actually flagged, so we'll see. I had flagged Augmented Clarity. I believe I hadn't flagged Brimming Conduction. 3 damage to target creature, and the excess would be dealt. You draw that many cards, but again, it's a totally playable card or effect, and it's stable to an MDFC. So really something to keep in mind. I had flagged Burning Apotheosis. It deals X damage to any target. You gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control, just because it can get pretty big, and it's got the MDFC. So anything that scales like that. Did I flag Cascading Ideal? Nope. So we can go down a little bit more. This makes 2/2/2s, and you put a counter on each creature token. This one was fine. I really like the back face art for this one. Grim Manifestation makes an XX where X is the greatest power among creature cards in your graveyard. Could be concerning. There's some creatures that can be like 14/14s or something in the yard, so maybe, and the fact that it's an MDFC maybe pushes it out, but I don't think this was on my like big watch list. Shadowy Takeover was a big 6 mana gain control, and then you sack it, which is, not horrible. Again, MDFC means that the front half is more modal. Skyline Tyrant was kind of big as a 6/6 flyer for 8, and then if it was cast, you untap up to 5 lands, which really helps with the breakthrough. Smuggler's Secrets exiles up to 3 non-land cards with total mana value X less from your graveyard, and then you can cast them. You don't cast them for free, you can just cast them. Steward's Repose. You and permanence control have hexproof. It costs 3 instead of like 2, I believe is usually the cost for this effect, but comes with an MDFC. Tenebrous Oath. We have Flash. When an enchanted creature dies, you get it back to the battlefield tap. And it's a 3 mana, so something dies, you're just going to cast this and get it back. And again, MDFC. I think Apocalypse Spire was fine. It draws a card for 3 and then 7 tap, deals 10 damage. It's one of those things that if you ever get to 7 mana, you're just going to kind of run away with the game as you just absolutely obliterate your opponent's best things every turn. Forged Ideal felt pretty safe at 5 and a 4. Makes 4/4 Human Angels, and then you reattached Forged Ideal to it. So as long as, it's not a token. So you can slowly get a lot of angels, but it costs a lot to do that. Voltaic Health Kite felt pretty good as a 5/5 flyer that gives your whole board +1/+0, and then you can draw cards if opponents were dealt damage this turn, so this seems fine. And I had flagged Heart of Undaum just because breakthrough, tap, draw 2 cards, then discard if you spent 7 or more mana. Seems like something you could do, and it combines with a few of our other lands that have a sink to draw more cards, and then you would draw more cards off of this one, etc., etc. So things to keep in mind. Moving up to the Mythics, I think I flagged every single one of the ones that enter tapped unless you control 3 or more other lands, just because, obviously, they become MDFCs that can become untapped. It's just the kind of stuff that I want to keep in mind. This one, Compulsive Ideal, is just your creatures get +2/+2, and your opponent's creatures are 2/2s for 7. But again, the backside of MDFC means the card is probably better than it seems. Shatter the Sky, I think was fine. It destroys all creatures, but if anyone had power 4 or greater, draw a card. I think this one was totally fine. I had no issues with it. Winged Adjudicator, 7 mana 5/5 flyer. When it enters, each player chooses a creature they control, destroy the rest. So I think I had voiced that there's a little, like, this is kind of like the same thing twice. Like, there's a little bit of overlap or, like, repeating, I would say. Cloud Gully, I think I had no issue with. So flying 4/4 for 5. Enters or attacks, you can exile an instant sorcery from your yard, and when it deals combat damage, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. I had flagged Seaborn Surge. It's 7 mana. You return all creatures, and then for each of your opponents, you get an 8/8. That seems a little too nuts, especially on the fact that it comes stapled with an MDFC. So that one seemed a little too much in my opinion. Veiled Transmuter is really cool. I like this card a lot. When it enters, you can cast an instant sorcery with mana value 2 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost, but it's a 4 mana 1/3. And when you do, you cast an instant sorcery, you'll get a 2/2 blue reflection creature token. So this card seemed like a pretty solid package here. Commisserati Enforcer seemed fine. You pick a number when they cast a non-creature spell with that mana value. They lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. So it's not a hard lock, but it will, absolutely hurt them. And if you name 1 and your opponent's on all bolts, they're not winning. But they're obviously throwing the first removal at this, but probably does a lot. So things to keep in mind. Everlasting Umbrage I had flagged because it's return up to X creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the first one is for 5 mana, you get 1. For 7 mana, you get 2. And it's got the MDFC, so, really hedges your bets there. 13th Columnist, I believe was fine. It's just end step. Each player gets a 2/1 black rogue that can't block, and being of your upkeep, if an opponent ever controls 13 or more creatures, they lose the game. So if they have a way of getting rid of them, you're shit out of luck. If they don't, you still have to defend yourself against a bunch of 2/1 black rogues. So cool kind of thing. I don't think it'll be very easy to win unless you have a deck that gives them a million things, and then you just win off of that. And you have to get to your upkeep, so definitely fine. Maximum Voltage is a card I flagged. Obviously, red. Add red is okay, but it's you can only cast 1 more spell this turn is the safe rider, but you do copy the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn X times. So I'm sure there's a way to get this to do some really nuts stuff, and the fact that it floats back its red is quite important. Molten Rock is really cool, but also really strong. You know, Flying Haste 5 mana 4/4 is okay baseline, but it's the beginning of each end step. If ever you spent 7 or more mana, you bring back Molten Rock with 2+1/+1 counters, so it becomes a 6/6 Flying Haste. But thankfully it enters tap, so you can't like crack in the same turn, but my gosh, you better have a way of dealing with it. It's kind of more of a limited at the same time. I think Constructed definitely has the tools to deal with it. I flagged Thundering Cataclysm. It's a 7 mana, deal 20 damage across the entire board. So the fact that like all the big ones are kind of like big sweeps is not like 3 of them are kind of like not necessarily my thing. Like this hammers your whole opponent, this hammers your whole opponent, this hammers your whole opponent. But it's fine. Again, MDFC thing, right? And then I think the only last one was this one. I think Borderworld Hydra was pretty fine. Vigilance, Trample, X's number of permanents you control for 7. Pretty cool. Doesn't have haste, so feels fine to me. Life Wreath Vow is a 7 mana. You put 6 counters on up to 2 target lands. You untap them. They become 0/0s with haste. So it's 7 mana for 2 6/6 hastes. Probably not the scariest, but MDFC, right? So things I had to keep in mind. I believe that's the last of my flag cards, so we're getting down near to the end here in the Mythics. Witness of Cycles, whenever a creature with greater power than it enters, you put 2 counters on it, and when it dies, you can exile it to search for a permanent with mana value 7 or greater put into your hand. So kind of a big, nice little package here. I'm sure there would be lots of things that people would figure out how to do. Enos here as a 3 mana power toughness equal number of creatures you control. And then he's got that sort of gains flying if you control a creature with flying, and then he's got the whole Odric package here. So kind of a cool mix, probably pretty safe. Hellas Arim is a 5 mana walker. 5 loyalty is pretty big to start out, but it's only a +1, not a +2. Taps a creature, stuns him, scries 1. The -3 to draw 2 cards, gain 2 life is neat. And -9, you get an emblem with simply your creatures become huge for each card in your hand. So it feels like a pretty safe package, all things considered, especially at 5 mana. Murai Bio Arcanus is a 5 mana 4/4. You have no maximum hand size, and when you cast a creature or sorcery spell, draw cards up to its mana value. It's probably fine and constructed, and I think it makes a pretty spicy commander. I'm not too concerned with it. Yeah, it's just, you know, big draws. Odessa Fierce Conduit, 3 mana 1/4. Once each turn when you cast a creature, instant, or sorcery spell, you can pay life equal to its mana value. If you do, you add black and or red in any combination equal to that spell's mana value, and you don't lose it. So once each turn, if you cast a creature, instant, or sorcery, you pay life instead of its cost, and then you refuel a bunch of black and red. Seemed like a pretty cool card. I could see this being a pretty popular commander as well. And then finally, Wormwood the Scholar. It's nice to see Letty back. 3 mana for 3 loyalty, +1, up to 1 target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. If it dies this turn, draw a card. The draw card is really neat here. -1 is you get a 2/1 black rogue creature token with this creature can't block, each opponent loses 1 life. That's probably the nicest part, is you'll just eventually get a bunch of 2/1s. Even though they can't block, you'll push the aggro, and your opponent also loses life off of it. That's really not that horrible. And then if you manage to get up to -7, each opponent sacks half the number of permanents they control, rounded up. Which brings us to the end of Undaum. So that's our video for this morning. I really like the set. I like the art. I feel that I would have maybe liked to did we see a Mythic Formulate? I don't want to say we didn't see one if we did, but yeah, I think a Mythic Formulate would have been really cool just to see as a sort of option, but that's, you know, just me. We did have some at rares. I believe there's at least 1 per color. I believe it's like a cycle. Yeah. I flagged a little bit for cards doing kind of like similar stuff. I gave Popcornia already the list of the cards that would have been on my watch list, and now that I've done the video, I've explained a little bit why. The limited seems really interesting. I'm just a little concerned, as I said, about some of the cards like Reflected Resolve maybe doing just too much, and the recurring removal. But it's a different take on the Battlecruiser set, where instead of ramping up to like Eldrazi and like really big creatures, Breakthrough means there's a little more flexibility, and things aren't growing as much necessarily level up. There is a few cards where it's like you pay, put counters. I'd be really interested in trying to draft this. So Popcornia, if ever you put it on Draftmancer, I'd be more than happy to give it some shot. And I would like to see this maybe be resent in the future. I think it's a cool set, and I think a few tweaks could make it even greater. but I think you've got something neat. And for those of you watching, definitely go check out the set online, and I highly recommend that you read the flavor text. There's a huge story spotlight to read. Even I haven't really had the chance to read all of it. So, whoops. With that said, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully this clocked in at less than an hour. We're going to find out in just a second. And yeah, we'll see each other soon. I don't know if I'm putting up a second video today, but I promise I will get the remaining set reviews in over the coming days, if not this week. So stay tuned, have a good one, and take care.